Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Not That Important. This is going to be a bit of a different episode compared to what we've done so far. It's going to be very lighthearted, so please don't take anything seriously. There's no intention to offend anyone over here, but we're just going to share our thoughts about some legendary players for whom this will be the last World Cup. So we've picked a few players from like a variety of teams, and we'll be talking about them. Who do you want to start with?
And just to start off, none of the Fab Four guys are in here because I think they get talked about enough. So we'll talk about some of the other guys. Let's start off with Rohit. Let's start off with Rohit. Rohit
Go
is
for it.
obviously. Do you have any standout performances that stick out to you from Rohit?
Dude, like honestly, all I can remember is that 2019 World Cup against us. I just remember like thinking of him as like, bro, how does anyone stop this guy? Like when he's in this sort of mood. I've heard Polish talk about it. Like you bowl maiden to him, you think you're on top. The next over he'll hit you for 20-25, right? So like you don't even know when you're in the game against him.
He's probably one of the most naturally gifted players that we've been privileged to see. Favorite perform. I mean, he has a couple of big match ducks against us. So obviously those are my favorite Rohit Sharma performances. Like I remember when you called Amr an ordinary bowler and then Amr got him in the Champions Trophy final. फिर उसने बोला कि जब मैं इनका बैटिंग कोच बनूंगा तो फिर शाहीन ने उसको आके एलबी मार दिया आगे से.
Yeah.
But on a
So just for people who don't know, like they asked him, like I think in the first match, in the 20 or not the first match, the only match we played each other in 2019 World Cup. I think after that match, they asked him like because Pakistan's batting is failing, कि आप कोई suggestions देंगे उनको ये वो. He's like हाँ मैं अगर पाकिस्तान का batting coach बना किसी दिन फिर suggestions दूंगा.
फिर शाहीन ने उसको कोचिंग दे ही दी अगले दो मैच. But that's besides the point. Rohit Sharma, I mean, is a great player. Jokes aside, I think the thing that stands out about him is how much MS Dhoni wanted to make him a player. MS Dhoni really wanted to make him a player. And I think that's where leadership comes in. I think Rohit Sharma made his one day debut in 2007. And it wasn't until 2013 where he was actually like a solidified member of that team. You had guys like Manoj Tiwari and some of these other lads coming in and performing where he wouldn't. But Dhoni persisted with him, tried him as Rohit Sharma's not an opener. For anybody who doesn't know, like he didn't bat opening until the Champions Trophy 6 years into his career, and it completely changed the guy's life in many ways. So I think a lot of credit has to be given to the persistence and the eye for talent that MS Dhoni had. And then the guy is an absolute monster of a player. Obviously, he kind of lives in the shadows of Virat because he's not as good as Virat. It is what it is. Like with Rohit Sharma, I know you can pull out stats and say he had like a quarterfinal 100 against Bangladesh and stuff, but you never really see it the same way in a big match you do from a guy like Kohli throughout T20 and one day formats. But he's a really scary player when he gets going, and his numbers are all time great. If he has, I think 30 hundreds, 48 average. The guy has double centuries. He makes batting look like an absolute joke when he's at his best, and add to that like his carefree attitude, and he has that like Mumbai swag about
Well,
him. Like he's not
honestly, you know how we look at Inzamam, like that lazy elegance and like that, just
yeah,
like okay, I'll show up and I'll hit, like
yeah.
Joe. Everyone
He's
can
got a
make
lot of
jokes about
that.
his fitness. He's got a bit of a tummy, like his round face, like, and he just comes out and he bats and he smacks
What
everyone
up, all
around. I'm just pulling
crazy?
around the scorecard for that match against Pakistan in 2019. Like I know I mentioned it, but I didn't remember how much he scored. Like 140 of 113. It's a fucking
Bro.
joke, bro. Like मैं तो जोत दिया.
Yeah, he ended like that phase of Hassan Ali's career at that point. Yeah, go ahead.
You want to talk about Mitchell Stark?
Mitchell Stark is one of my favorite cricketers of all time. And I know you wanted to specifically talk about him too. And
Dude,
there's a certain game that you remember as well with him. So I'll let you
yeah.
get to
Like
that.
there's actually two guys on this list who we wanted to talk a lot about, both like left arm seamers who absolutely killed it in the 2015 World Cup, and that's the game we want to talk about here. So obviously New Zealand versus Australia. In New Zealand, of course, the two hosts for the tournament, the group game that they played against each other, and these two bowlers just absolutely like killed it. Trent
Put on a
bowled
show.
10 overs. They literally put on a show. Like I think everyone else was just sitting back and watching and just admiring them, right? Australia batted first, bowled out for 151. Grant both 10 overs, 5 for 27. Like, they could not play him, literally. Like, he ran through the lower order for Australia as if it was nothing for them. They actually had a pretty good start in the game. Like, they were 3 for 80, one just rolled to 151 all out just because of Trent Bolt's brilliance. And then Mitchell Stark, obviously not wanting to be outdone, came out with an absolute like just fury
Oh
and
my
bowling
God.
those like in swinging Yorkers that he honestly it's like he should almost have a trademark on them just because like of what he did in that World Cup.
Yeah.
Again, 9 overs, 6 for 28, and he almost got them over the line. It was
Almost.
actually, funnily enough, like New Zealand got the win in the end, and Trent Bolt was at the crease. They're 152 for 9, so they won with 1 wicket to spare. Kane Williamson
Yeah.
hit that insane six, like right down the
Yeah.
ground. But I think, despite all that, this match will be
And
remembered for two absolute
that's just
giants
when
of the
Kane
game.
was
Yeah,
becoming Kane too. But I remember Stark literally like willed them towards the finish line there because New Zealand like scratched around a little bit, but by the point that Stark came in for, I think it was his third spell, the game was done, and then he pulled out like a Wakar Yunus esque spell at the end that almost got them over the line. And I think that World Cup in many ways was defined by those two left armers. On Stark alone, we'll get to Trent Bolt, but with Stark, I think he is that first prototype for what we've seen of Shaheen now. Like I remember when Shaheen came in, I was thinking the man like this guy reminds me a little bit of Stark, and lo and behold, he became like his heir apparent in terms of like running in and bowling in swing Yorkers at 145 and knocking stumps out of the ground. I have a stat for you that I want to say. If we Who's the best left arm seamer of all time, in
Wasim
your
Akram.
opinion? Wasim Akram. So in a much smaller, obviously, sample size, Mitchell Stark has a better average by about a run, and his strike rate is. I'm just gonna make sure I'm saying this correctly. Yeah, his strike rate is almost 10 points better than Wasim Akram's in an era where it is so hard to bowl. Wasim Akram bowled in an easier era for bowlers. Mitchell Stark has been the leading wicket taker at not one but two World Cups
2 World Cups,
consecutively.
yeah.
I think Milake is the
Madness.
48, yeah, 49 wickets itself
Man,
in the World Cup.
he cemented his place as like one of the all-time World Cup greats. Like,
If I think about the best limited over bowlers I've seen for a career, guys who I actually got to watch, I think it's him and Malinga. And I don't know, I feel like this guy always gets disrespected. He always gets underrated, but he is one of the ODI goats for sure. Like there's no doubt about this. Even now, you talk about the best fast bowlers in the world in the last 4 or 5 years. Mitchell Stark's name has always come after guys
always.
like Bumrah or these days Shaheen or Rabadas. People always have someone ahead of him, but he is an absolute genius of a bowler, and it's just incredible. Like the amount of like he's played 111 matches, bro. He has 9 5 wicket hauls, 12 4 wicket hauls. Like this guy is one of the most destructive bowlers of all time, and he can bowl in all phases of the game, and he has the ticker for the big occasion too. I don't know how, but I always feel like he's gone super underrated. Trent Bolt is also one of the great left arm seamers of all time, and he's like one of the best fast bowler fielders I've seen. Like I remember early into his career, he's like taking one-handed catches at point and diving in the outfield, and then obviously being a Pakistani fan, there were a couple of results we needed to go our way to get into the semifinal. And one actually happened before the situation itself arose. Like if West Indies had won a game against New Zealand in that World Cup, Pakistan would have qualified. And they lost at the very end with Trent Bolt taking a very, very measured and composed catch to get Carlos Brathwaite at the end, where Carlos Brathwaite was playing one of the all-time innings. And then, ironically enough, it's just something with New Zealand cricket, I guess, that within that penultimate over, I think the final ball of James Neesham, Ben Stokes hits it to deep mid wicket or long on, and Trent Bolt takes the catch and he steps on the rope.
Yeah.
It's not something you ever expect to see from a Kiwi fielder, but that's what happened before he had to go in, bowl the final over, which was tied. Obviously, runs coming, 6 runs
Off the
coming off the bat
freaking
of Ben
bat.
Stokes diving in. One, it was luck itself, and two, we discover after the game that one of those runs should not have been awarded. Then the poor guy goes and he bowls the super over as well, and
Dude,
they get through on a fucking stupid ass technicality at the end. So like with a little bit more luck, like as great as Trent Bolt is, like his legacy would have been elevated to that next level. They've
Yeah,
played in two World Cup finals now, but it's like two very similar bowlers in a way, and one has just in some ways been luckier with the team success and all those types of things. But maybe that's just a New Zealand versus Australia thing altogether.
yeah. You spoke about the 2019 World Cup final. So the other side of the coin was Ben Stokes, just absolutely killing it. Again, he's gone on to sort of cement his name as one of the most clutch players to ever play the game. We've seen it in the Ashes where he just somehow stands on his own and just delivers like match-winning innings where he's just blocking the ball for like ages and somehow just changes gears and just accelerates and starts smacking the ball everywhere. And I think arguably one of his finest white ball performances. In fact, I don't think there's any need to say arguably. His finest white ball performance was in the ODI final, where he scored 84 of 98 balls and took England over the line, not just within the game itself, but also in the Super Over. Obviously, under fortunate circumstances with the boundary and the ball hitting the bat and all of that stuff. But like, that's not his problem, you know. He did
Not
what
his
he could.
fault.
He kept England in the game like single-handedly. He had that excellent partnership with Josh Butler when like New Zealand just thought that they were starting to wrap the game up. And he's one of those guys where, dude, if you don't get him out, like the game is not over. And just taking it back to remember the name Carlos Brathwaite, this guy was absolutely like, you know, World Cup final. He got hit for 4 sixes to lose it to West Indies. Imagine if that was like a Pakistani or Indian player. Imagine like he would never have seen the light of day. Like this
हसन
guy
अली
would
ने
have
ये
been
तो बोला भी
destroyed.
कि अगर बेन स्टोक्स पाकिस्तान
Yeah.
नहीं होता तो वो उसका करियर ही खत्म हो जाता. So
Versus like they identify the talent, they back the talent. This man comes and delivers them a world championship. So that's
yeah,
what champions are made of. They bounce back from adversity, and that's what
and
Ben
between
Stokes did.
the
And
Super Over and the innings and the Super Over, से जाके सुट्टा मारा dressing room में when
yeah, exactly, exactly.
he came out to bat again.
Fucking boss man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like, bro, like so rarely do you actually get to see like these types of character arcs, if you will, like in professional sport where a guy completely like bottles it, bottles it on like the biggest stage in front of like, and Carlos Brathwaite was on some shit that day too. But then to come back, and I don't know if there's a player who's performed at the highest stage like for their country. For England, Ashes is arguably bigger than all of this stuff, which is another conversation. But World Cup final, he wins it for them. T20 World Cup final, he wins it for them. Headingley 2019, like, bro,
Wow.
like I mean, you think of the
Mm.
clutchest cricketers of all time, like in our generation it's probably somebody like there's a Kohli, there's a Dhoni, maybe before, like guys like Inzamam, guys like Wasim, guys like Javed. I'm just
Javed
naming from
Miandad. Yeah.
Pakistan. Michael Bevan, like these are the type of guys you think of. He is in that very very elite category of a guy who you just, you know that when the chips are down, like he is gonna perform. And no game is done in any format if Ben Stokes is still at the crease, especially. And then you talk about like, man, like he's one of the best fielders of the generation too. The guy can bowl 140 clicks when he's healthy, and then the way he bats and what he's done for England from a leadership point of view in Test cricket, like the guy really has done everything at this point.
Yeah. And that is why they've brought him back out of retirement to play this World Cup. So very excited to see how he performs because it could be the last time we see him in an ODI World Cup.
Were there ever any doubts for you though that he was gonna come back?
No doubts at all. I
No
knew it.
doubts, huh?
Dude, we're
Yeah,
Pakistani. We've seen it all before. Like, in fact,
yeah,
like the
yeah.
day he announced it, I might have said that, well, there's a World Cup next year. Like, he's obviously coming
इधर तो
back
हम
for
हाथ
it.
जोड़ते कि तुम retire कर ही लो please,
Yeah,
लेकिन
exactly.
there it's a different scene. We had
जो
a
बात
feeling
है.
he would be back, and as a neutral man, like if Ben Stokes was still in the prime of his career and not playing the World Cup, it would have taken a lot of color out of it. So to have him
Yeah.
in there is awesome from just a cricket fan's point of view.
The last player we had that we wanted to talk about was Shakib Al Hassan. Because he's from Bangladesh, we don't get to talk about him a lot just because he hasn't had the team success that some of the other players that we've mentioned have had. But this man has been performing and delivering at the highest level since like we were like so small watching
Yeah.
cricket. Like I feel like he's always been there. It's almost like a comfort level. Oh, like Bangladesh playing today, like Shakib will be performing. He'll bowl his left arm spin. He'll break the game in the middle overs. He'll break a chase if he needs to. Like he'll always like deliver when you need him to. And we've seen it time and time again. Like it almost seems like he's ageless. Like he's still doing it
Yeah.
in today's. He's been captain and not been captain and been captain again, and now he's beefing with Tamim Iqbal. Like obviously he has that level of he having been like such an important player for Bangladesh. Like he's obviously carries himself with a little bit of like I'm the guy in this team, and he has absolute
Yeah.
right to.
Yeah.
But like it's also interesting comparing that to the rest of the Bangladeshis, right? Because they like we talked a little
Maybe
bit
lack
about in our
confidence sometimes.
exactly
Yeah.
yeah.
But he definitely thinks he's better than all of his teammates. Like you can see that. Like you see him throw tantrums, you see him yell at umpires, you see him
He
hit
is
stumps with his bat when he's
yeah
out.
yeah
But
yeah.
for them, he is the guy. I mean, like, who's
It's
the? Go ahead, go ahead.
we talk a little bit about like what it takes to get to that level. Like we talk about like players like Ronaldo and like the mentality that they have, and like how a lot of people don't like the way they are in like dressing rooms and things because just they demand so much of themselves and of others. And like I think obviously not taking Shakib to that level, but he is sort of like that personality, right? Where like you
For them
have
especially,
those
yeah.
temper tantrums, you have those angsty moments, but like it's all what makes you the great player you are
And he is one of the best all rounders of all time.
all the
Like
time.
you, I mean, he has I think 300 one-day wickets, almost 7,500 runs. But just beyond that, like you look at how versatile he is as a cricketer. Like he's somebody who could come in down the order, and play those innovative shots, the scoops, finishing the innings, and then like in the latter part of his career, like the last World Cup, you saw them send him at three, and he was
He
doing the
bat wherever
most
he
at the
needs
last
to.
time. Like he could. So I'm almost disappointed. Like I think Bangladesh should have been playing him at three for a much longer time because it was always clear that he was their best player.
Yeah.
And he was always, I think, even in that Asia Cup they almost won against us, 2012. Like he kind of set that game up, and there's nothing that Shakib can do on the pitch. So now like this whole we talk about it a lot, like those four or five Bangladeshi cricketers who were there for like the upset of India in 2007. Like he was always the face of that generation. I think especially after Ashraful got kicked out of the team, and he really has been representing for them for the better part of 20 years now, man, which is crazy to think
Yeah.
about.
2019 World Cup, top run scorers, Rohit Sharma at the top, David Warner second, Shakib Al Hassan third.
Third,
606 runs in 8
and he
matches.
played
Didn't
less
even
games
make
than
the
them.
knockout stage. Didn't
Yeah,
even make it to the knockout stage. 200. Just absolutely killed it, bro. Averaging 87 with a strike rate of 97, 96, 600 plus runs, bro. And
scored
to round it off,
full
like I
time.
said, Sharma, Warner, Shakib Al Hassan were the top three, and Williamson and Root were 4 and 5. So all players who are probably going to be seen for the last time in World Cup cricket. So
Yeah.
yeah, really excited to see how these guys go because again, they've been incredible part of our experience watching cricket, and yeah, just again, always amazing to see like the top players perform, and these guys have just done it time and time again.